Well. Here we are for another week. This is NLL Lacrosse Talk. I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. He's Gary Groob, and we have a very special guest on the telephone, some guy named Doug Favell. For those of you of my generation, Maple Leaf, and of course, an Ontario Lacrosse Hall of Famer. And he did both at the same time. In fact, he had to make a decision. But before we talk about that, Doug, I'd like to ask you about how you picked up the stick.
How I picked up the stick was because my dad was a lacrosse player, and I was given a stick when I was probably 4 years old.
So you were the next generation.
Yeah, I was the next generation.
What kept you in it? What did you like about the game so much that it kept you interested?
Well, because my dad played, and I watched my dad play lacrosse, and it was just something I wanted to do. And when I picked the stick up, I constantly played, just throw the ball off a wall, catch it, do all that stuff that kids do, and got involved in lacrosse probably at 6 or 7 years old. Back then, that was really young. But I was just It seemed to me that's what everybody did. My uncle Barney, he played lacrosse, and my dad played lacrosse, so it was something that looked like I was probably destined to do.
Well, you're well known for your hockey career. Played for the Toronto Maple Leafs. You were traded for Bernie Parent, came to Toronto and had a pretty good career. You had an owner, though, who didn't agree with you about playing lacrosse and being a professional hockey player. What was your hockey? How did your hockey life start? Was it back when you were 5'6" as well, or did you pick it up later?
Well, played pond hockey, but I started playing in leagues when I was 8 years old, and I never really wanted to be a goalie, but back then it's hard to imagine, but when I was 1953. When I was 8 years old, the league was called the Little AHL over at Ridley College in St. Catharines,
right.
And they had 6 teams, and each team had 2 goalies, but the aging was 8 to 12, so they had 6 teams, and for the whole city. But you were playing against 12-year-olds if you were 8. So making the team was very difficult if you were 8, 9 years old. But I was very fortunate when I was 8 that my dad and a good friend of his, Eddie Parker, were coaching one of the teams. And so I went for the tryouts, and my dad said to me, he said, "Dougie, if you're going to play, you want to play in the league." He said, you're not big enough and a good enough skater to make it as a forward. But he said, "Well, why don't you try out in goal?" So I did, and I was one of the 2 guys. I made the team as a goalie, but I never really wanted to be a goalie. And then I played this 4 years, and then when I was 12, my skating had improved, and I played in what's called the Little NHL, and I would play the first half of the game in goal, and I'd play the second half of the game as a forward. And so I kind of got used to it, but I also just played forward in lacrosse, and I had an ability to score, and so I loved scoring, and but in order to play hockey, I had to play in goal. So that was how I ended up in goal, and it went from there. There didn't look like there was future in lacrosse, but the NHL was a goal you could realize, and so I stuck with hockey, but I still played lacrosse every year. And what I said really what happened was that as I grew, I realized that when I actually got into the pros, that hockey was my job. I mentioned this in my Hall of Fame speech, and said, hockey was my job, but lacrosse was my passion. And I said I never wanted to give up lacrosse, even though I risked a lot with contracts, because you couldn't play two sports. If you got hurt, your contracts were void in hockey if you got hurt doing another sport. So, but I took the chance because I was an idiot.
Well,
I played up as long as I could, and then '74, when I was with Philadelphia Wings, Harold Bell had found out that I was playing lacrosse, and they cut me off. The Flyers, when I was with the Flyers, they didn't really find out that I was playing lacrosse, so it was easier to hide back then playing lacrosse from the Flyers. But when in Toronto, obviously, once you get to Toronto, you become a little bit more exposed. And when Harold gave me that 6-year contract, when I got traded from Philly, the second year there, they got a little nervous and told me that I couldn't play lacrosse anymore.
Well, I got to tell you, the irony is not lost on me. On one hand, you protected a net. On the other hand, you carried it. But we've established that you preferred carrying the net than protecting it, I guess.
Yeah. It was a lot more fun.
Yeah, we talk about this sport all the time, and the people gravitate to the sport because of the relationships that they get. I should say people get involved with the sport and they keep the sport because of the relationships they create, and also stay in it because of the relationships they create. I appreciate you. I appreciate what you've done in lacrosse, and now I'm going to put your hands on the fire. I'm going to hand you over to Gary. Gary, be gentle with him, okay? Hey, be nice.
You were able to take the best of both worlds, because you used all that agility that you had from lacrosse, and you became really cutting edge in hockey, because you, Tony Esposito, a few other guys were putting in this butterfly idea in an era where everybody was stand up, and your reflexes and all that being quick from lacrosse really set you apart from a lot of the other goalies.
Yeah, I played that way, and I grew up in St. Catharines watching. One of the other guys was Roger Crozier that played that, and Roger Crozier was on the Teepees that won the Memorial Cup in '59-60 here in St. Catharines, and I watched a lot of the games on Saturday nights here in St. Catharines, and I love Roger Crozier, and I also love Glenn Hall. But the reality was I was trying to be a stand-up goalie because my dad had played lacrosse with Harry Lumley in Owen Sound,
right?
One year, and became friends with Harry Lumley, and he brought him to the house one time, and that was I became a Harry Lumley guy. And Harry Lumley, of course, back then in the '50s, they all played stand-up pretty well. So I really wanted to be like Harry Lumley, but my brain wouldn't let me. It just made me a flopper.
Right.
I considered myself just a road hockey goalie that made it.
Right. Now, you had big shoes to fill, because your dad was a Man Cup champion in lacrosse. Did he have a lot to do with your development in lacrosse?
Excuse me, Gary?
Did your dad have a lot to do with you in lacrosse?
No, he was with me all the way. He just said, Doug, you do what you want to do. And I mean, I was young enough back then, like when Dad played, when he got back from the war. I mean, he won the Man Cup in 1946 in St. Catharines. He won a Man Cup in 1948 in Hamilton with the Bengals, and he won 1950 with Owen Sound, Mercury. So he won 3 Man Cups, and he was instrumental, and he played goal, and he played like senior B hockey, and he played goal there. So I used to go to all the games, and I was pretty intrigued about the goaltending thing, and I was probably a better lacrosse player and would have made more money if lacrosse had ever paid money. But
yeah, that's a story for a lot.
Before, yeah, you gotta, when you look at it, I never thought I was going to make the NHL, but I thought I could maybe make a living playing pro hockey. But anyway, it ended up as a great thing. But my dad supported me all the way through and just said, Doug, you do what you want to do. And obviously I was a scorer and proud of what I did playing lacrosse. So.
Right. Now we have a connection in a sense, because you played for the Green Gales. I'm still with the Green Gales doing their tours out to Prague and all the tournaments there. But let's talk about how you got involved with the Green Gales. And I guess at that time Jim Bishop was still running everything.
Yeah. Well, back then you were allowed when you went west. When you went west back then, you were allowed to pick up 3 players. Mm-hmm. From the league to go with to supplement the Green Gales. And in that year, 64, we ended up going to the Minnow Cup was in New Westminster. So they got to pick up 3 players, and Jimmy Bishop picked me up, Billy Armour and Billy Young. And we were the 3 guys that went west with the Green Gales. And we took the train out from Oshawa right out to Vancouver and to New Westminster, and you get on a train for 3 days with guys, you get to know them pretty good. So it was wonderful. That was the Gaylord Powless era, and I've made a lot of friends. And just actually a couple of weeks ago, I played golf with Larry Lloyd and Bobby Allen, Coach Bobby Allen, and coached us in Philadelphia, and Neil Armstrong, who I kind of befriended on the way out with the Green Gales. So that was, it was lifelong friends. So that's over almost 60 years of friendship, and I really hadn't seen those guys since '74 when I played lacrosse in Philly.
Right.
But they were, you became close. It's like sports. People who play on teams, you have a bond with those guys for a long time, and we just, lacrosse, like I said before, was my passion. I loved it, and I loved playing the game, and we went west and won the Minnow Cup. So we were, it was a great experience. And playing for Bishop was a great experience because we had so much respect for them back then. That they were so dominant. But it was neat to see. And you could see why they had they'd get off a bus when they came to play. They'd get off the bus and they'd all be in jackets and ties. Their green jackets and ties, and the rest of the league, we just, you'd be in shorts and a t-shirt going to a game. And it was pretty impressive to see that. And they played like that. They played like Bish was a lacrosse genius, in my opinion. So
you hold a record that I don't know if anybody will ever equal it, and that is in the same year you won the Minto Cup and the Memorial Cup, the championship for Junior A, OHL, and the Minto Cup. What was that like?
Well, at the time, I didn't realize it. We won the Minto Cup in the fall of '64, and then I was with Niagara Falls Flyers. We started a '64-65 season, and we went to the Memorial Cup in Edmonton. We won Yeah, we won the Memorial Cup in Edmonton that year. So I didn't realize it at the time. Didn't really think a big deal about it. And then somebody did some research and said, I don't think there's anyone that ever has played on a Minnow Cup and a Memorial Cup in the same year. And we looked back and no, nobody had. Closest, I think, was actually a St. Catharines guy. His name was Whitey Burge, Peter Burge. And he got the same thing. He got picked up. He played with Memorial Cup TP team in 59-60 with Crozier and that. And then he got picked up, I think it was Hastings at the time, which was a Peterborough team, which flipped back and forth between Peterborough and Hastings. And Pete got picked up by Hastings, but it wasn't in the same year. He was 2 years. He was 2 years different. So
but the connection to from hockey to lacrosse, like Gary was saying, you had this talent that helped in hockey, because you played in lacrosse. A lot of hockey players play lacrosse. We've seen it nowadays. Or after you were involved, we've heard that a lot of players enjoyed playing both, and they used playing both to help the other. Did you find that as well? Were there things that you learned in lacrosse that helped in hockey, and things that you learned in hockey that helped in lacrosse?
Not really, because when you're playing a different position, like going from goal to forward, it's entirely different. But the mental aspect of the game and is always there. Getting up and getting your adrenaline going and all that stuff was the same in hockey as it was in lacrosse, but it's different when you're playing goal. You have a different attitude, and you're there to stop the puck. But like I said, that to me was a lot of fun at the time. And back then, the kids, we played a lot of road hockey, and it was you got to play both back then. And like I said, even as I was coming up playing hockey, I got to play forward and goal at the same time. So I was kind of fortunate. But like I said, to get as far as I did in hockey, I would never have done that. Because of my skating, I would have never been a forward. And there was somebody told me one time, they said, Doug, when I was playing, they said old timers hockey, and they said, Jesus, you're really good, because I only played forward when I played old timers hockey. And they said, Jesus, you're really good. How come you didn't play in the NHL? I said, well, I got I was told I had NHL hands, but I had industrial league legs.
You got to take me through this other record that you have from '64, and that's the three goals in 11 seconds. That's still mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, I think that's the one that may not be broken, and the other one won't either, because the guys aren't allowed to play lacrosse anymore. So,
right.
So it's and they're making too much money. Back then, we didn't make any money, so it didn't matter. They didn't care. But now, when there's so much money involved, so they won't be able to play both lacrosse and hockey. And to that extent, they've extended the training camps and that, so it overlaps. The Minnow Cup overlaps playing with hockey.
Yeah.
So
you can't be in two places at once.
Yeah. So anyway, the one with the 3 goals, I think that would probably stand up. It's pretty tough. I was very fortunate. I played, and that game in New Westminster, and Gaylord Powless was my centerman, and possession of the ball. Like, Gaylord was such a great center. He could pull the ball out 90% of the time, which was a big edge. So it just happened. We played. I scored a goal, and we went back to center to line up, and I line up on the forward side with 2 defensemen, and in between them. And Gaylord would always give me a look when I went back. He'd just look at me, and he tilted his head to the right. That means, like, when I broke off, I would go to the right. and he'd get the ball, and my game was speed, fast runner, so I would break off and then just cut down towards the net. And both times after I scored the goal, he drew the ball out. I was gone, and he threw me the ball, and about probably 25 feet, 30 feet from the net. And I went in and scored. We went back to the center, did the same thing. The defenseman went back. Didn't want it to happen again. So Gaylord gave me the look, to go straight down. So when I went straight down, I looked over my shoulder, and there was the ball again. I scored again. But it didn't occur at the time. I knew I scored 3 in 11 seconds. And but nobody made a big deal about it. So, and I think I remember there was a write-up. I got a clipping of it. I kept scrapbooks and stuff, and there was a clipping in it, and it said, because they knew I was playing junior hockey at the time, and somebody said, "Oh, one of the pickups for Oshawa was Doug Favell, and he scored 3 goals in 11 seconds, but he didn't do much else in the series."
Right.
So I thought that, I had to laugh. Okay. Well, it was tough because I was a pickup, and I was on the first line playing 40 minutes for St. Catharines, but when I played for Jimmy with all that talent, I was on the third line,
right,
and just trying to fit in, and anyway, and I was more worried after practicing with the Green Gales. I was more worried about not letting my guy score.
Right.
That's what Bishop taught. So you had to play both ends. That was new for me.
Right. Nowadays, they wouldn't know what to do either because it's all specialized. I remember having Dave Durrani on the show, and he was talking about, we used to be the fastest game on 2 feet. Then we got specialized, and everybody stops and does all this. Back when you guys played, it was fast end-to-end continuous.
Yeah. And that's I scored probably a lot of majority of my goals with the goalie we made. We had Buck McCready. We had really good goaltenders that could throw the ball. They'd make a save, and if I was out, they knew as soon as they made the save, I was gone. And with the speed, and they'd throw me the long ball, and I got a lot of goals that way. But it's I don't like the game the way they play now. I don't like that runoff. Defense comes on.
Yeah.
And I talked to Bobby Allen when great Hall of Famer, and talked to him about it when we played golf, and he said, "Yeah, Doug," he said, he says, "Yeah, I don't like that." He said, "But I was responsible for the shot clock," and I said, "Well, I love that part." Because the old days, the guys, you'd show up to play, and there'd be, a lot of guys didn't show up if they go on the road, and you'd end up with 10 guys or 8 or 9 guys to go play Peterborough or something. And
right.
all you do is walk the ball up the floor. You try to keep the game so slow. So there wasn't that, there wasn't that speed involved in the game. It was kind of walk the ball up the floor. So the shot clock was a great idea to speed the game up. But then they switched to that transition where the defensive guys never barely touched the ball, and they beat on you for the whole night as a forward, and normally the guys like me, we were skinny, guys, and nowadays when you play, the small guys are the scorers the same way, but the guys now aren't. Big guy back then was 6 foot or 6'1", and the guys now are 6'5", 6'6", playing defense, and all they do is pound on you the whole game, and you don't get a chance to get them back. You can stand there and hit a guy knowing that he can never get you back. It makes your game a little easier. A little tough on the forwards. Anyway, so I don't like that switching off, and but I watched the game in the Minnow Cup here, and I was impressed that they do try. They do leave a guy out there sometimes keep the other team honest if they can catch them napping, on the switch.
Right.
So anyway, yeah, it's too bad, but there's good things and bad things, the different eras.
Well, I found with Six Nations in their Man Cup run this last couple of years, they've had so much talent that they've been running lines again, as opposed to specialized players, because they have just too much talent. So they can't really run guys out the back door who are big time scorers all over the place.
Oh, really? I didn't realize. I don't follow lacrosse that much, but that's interesting because I love to see that. So
yeah, they're like the Harlem Globetrotters when they get going in the summer. It was a wild season to watch. They've three-peated now, so it's been crazy with all the talent that they've been able to secure. And again, they can't just put a guy out the back door who scores 80 assists and 60 goals during the NLL year, and you're going to put him out the back door. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. So that's good. That's maybe they'll start. They'll go back to it. But once again, you've got a shot clock now too. So that really speeds the game up. I was fascinated how fast the game actually was, even with the running on and off. They were well trained in that. And the transition of getting out on the floor, when the ball changed hands, both teams were really good at that. And so you weren't walking off. A lot of times in the old days, guys would be walking off. They were going to the bench walking. So it does make it for a decent. I like that part of the game that the speed of the game is still pretty good. But you're playing half court. It's a half court game now. Mm-hmm.
That's so true. Now, you were playing with the Philadelphia Wings. Now, this is an interesting thing for me, because I remember having Ed Tepper on the show, and originally it was just wooden floors and things like that. He came up to Toronto and watched an indoor soccer game, and him and Ed Snyder, and all of a sudden we have turf, and it was pleasing to his eye. You have guys like John Grant Sr. going, well, that's what killed the game, because you had the noise of you guys running up and down the floor, and all of a sudden you had a carpet down and like everything's silent.
Yeah. And that stuff was never any good. You were slipping too much of it. A game sometimes that whatever they used to glue it down and stuff, it just didn't seem solid. And luckily I didn't play on it very often. So,
right.
I was more like, even when I played with the Green Gales that year, and they had the famous wooden floor out in New Westminster.
Yep.
We played in that floor because I saw this year that they actually, that was the same arena. That's the arena where we won the Minnow Cup in.
Right.
Where they played this year. And they were showing the floor, and they said, yeah, this is the famous wooden floor. Jeez, that's where I played.
I was actually at Wayne Colley's place up in Northern Ontario a little while ago, and he has one of the pieces of the original floor in his collection of things there, which is amazing, just to see that up close. But here's the thing: we were talking about Larry Lloyd, and when I had him on the show, he talked about, of course, the first game of the Philadelphia Wings was the day that the Flyers won the Cup, which had to be strange for you since you had just gotten traded from that team to the Leafs.
Yeah. Well, I was actually here that day.
Right.
I had a back operation. I was 74. I had my back operated on in April after the playoffs with the Leafs. We got beat up by Boston, and I had to go in and have my back. I actually had a disc thing that they injected into the disc, which was working for a while, but it worked for a bunch of the guys, Cashman, a whole bunch of hockey guys that had that done.
Right.
It was kind of a pain injection into the disc, and I had that, but I couldn't play, and that's how stupid I was. I shouldn't have been playing. I had back operation by June. I was playing by June.
Right.
In May, the May date the Flyers won the Cup, they asked me to come and do some color because they were broadcasting it. They wanted me to do some color, and being back in Philadelphia and all that, associated with the Flyers. So they asked me to come and do the color. So I was actually there that day. doing the radio for that night. We were after the Flyer win in the afternoon, but after the Flyers won, I did actually, because I've been there 6 years with all those guys, and I got in, and they were very good to me and welcomed me into the room after they won and stuff. So that was a great experience to have seen that. It was a better experience if I was there. But
yeah, exactly. Well, you were there through the whole forming of the Broad Street Bullies. What was it like in that room as it was starting to form? Because the Flyers originally wasn't much. When they started developing an attitude and a character, then they became that championship team, and everybody got the Philadelphia flu. Talk about it from the other side, being in that room.
Excuse me, Gary?
What was it like being part of a team that generated that saying, the Philadelphia flu?
Well,
what was that like?
Well, it was strange for me because I was 5'11", 165 pounds, so it's pretty tough to be a bully. Unless you're playing with Pee-wee kids. But it was the way they had to win. And I mean, the whole key, everybody will acknowledge that the key to the whole thing was Freddie Shiro, the coach.
And, the professor.
Freddie was a genius. He was a hockey genius. He was a really different guy. He was a complex guy, but a wonderful guy and a very intelligent hockey guy. He would go over the years before, he was going to Russia to see what Tikhonov was doing. And he came back, and when I was with the Flyers, we did a lot of Russian drills back then, which seemed strange. But Freddie was ahead of his time in the training part of it. And and that's when they started to get better. And he said, Fred wrote the book Winning Through Intimidation, and he said, like, there's a lot of teams like the Bruins and the Canadiens that we may not be able to beat if we don't have an edge, and we got to have our edge is going to be, we want to make it really uncomfortable for them to play, and it's winning through intimidation. So, and Freddie, after he was done with the Flyers, he always said, you know what, I won 2 Stanley Cups winning through intimidation. He said, I want to win. So the next year after, when the Flyers let him go, he said, I want to win with skill. And he had originally been in the Rangers system. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't remember this, but he said he went to coach the New York Rangers, and he said, I'm going to try to win with skill. And of course, that's when they had Hedberg and Nielsen and Rod Gilbert, and they had a skilled team. And he didn't go in there and try to change everybody and pick up a whole bunch of goons. He just he said, I want to win the skill. And that year they went to the finals against Montreal, and they got beat by Montreal in the finals.
Yeah,
he took that team, the Rangers that never, could never win, and put them in the Stanley Cup final. That's when John Davidson was the goalie for the Rangers then. Yeah. They played Montreal in the final, but they got beat, I think, in 6 games or 5 or 6 games or something. But that's how brilliant Freddie was. Anyway, interesting guy.
Yeah, they ran up against a more skilled team.
Yeah.
That was the problem, right?
That was the problem. Yeah. But he got him there. I mean, the Flyers didn't get there. He got him there. And like I said, the winning thing was it was winning through intimidation. He was smart. He was a smart guy. I remember when I went in the room after they won the cup against Boston that year, and it was on board. I had these big sayings, great sayings on the board all the time. And he had that one, and his goal was, he said, if we want to win today, we're gonna give the puck to Bobby Orr all the time. And the guys all went, what? He said, look, he says, I figured it out. Bobby Orr is playing his, the exhibitions, all this stuff. And he said, Bobby Orr is playing his 95th game, and he plays, 35 minutes every game, 35 to 40 minutes every game. He said, it's the middle of May, and he's got to be worn down. I know he's the greatest player, but he said he's got to be worn down. So he said, if you want to win the cup, you're going to dump the puck in his corner every time. And when you arrive, you will arrive with ill humor, and you will hit him. Because, everybody kind of, the superstars get a lot of leeway. But Freddie's theory was, we're just going to keep dumping it into Orr's corner, and we're going to hit him every time he goes into the corner for the puck. So it worked out.
It sure did.
Everybody thought he was crazy, but you know what? He was smart. He was smarter than everybody else. You can see the end of that game, watching. You see the end of the game, the third period of that game. Bobby was, he was dead. He was dead tired. And, because he was playing so much, and he just, sixth game, all the games and everything, he was dead tired. You could just see it.
They still do that today.
What's that?
They still do it today. They still dump it into the number one defenseman's corner, and then go to wear him out.
Yeah.
It's typical of the playoffs.
Yeah. Well, they just dump it in every time anyway. But yeah, I didn't know they did that. Pick on the number one defenseman.
Oh,
back then, you see the defense. Back in those days, defense only usually played 5 guys.
Yeah.
You played 4 guys, and one guy'd be a rotate through for penalties and stuff. But now you're rotating 6 defensemen pretty well most of the time.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. But anyway, yeah. Sorry to get off board there.
No. You're
not at all. Not at all. I love it. I want to talk a bit about your masks. In the era there, everybody had the plain white masks and the plexiglass stuff. Cheever started putting stitches on for every time he got hit by the puck. You were really the first one who started making them colorful and putting logos on and things like that. What brought you to the idea that let's eliminate this white stuff and just put pictures on there? Because every team you had something different. Every year you had something different, really.
Yeah. Well, obviously if you're not with the same team, you got different colors.
Well, yeah, but even styles.
The other reason now the story is that we were playing. We were in Philly, and Ernie Higgins, the guy who made the mask back then from Boston, and it was white. And we were playing on Halloween. It was actually the 30th. It wasn't the 30th. It was Halloween. People all got dressed up and stuff. But it was for Halloween, and so I said to Frank Lewis, who was the trainer, I said, we were morning skate, and I said, hey Frank, can you paint my mask orange? And he said, well, probably. Why? I said, well, it's Halloween. I said, it looks like a pumpkin. I'll be the great pumpkin for Halloween. And he said, yeah. So he took it home and he painted it orange. Painted it orange for the game that night. We played LA and we won. We beat them 4-1. And of course, once you win, you're not going to change. So
right.
So and you couldn't, once he painted it, it was going to have to stay anyway. But it ended up being the first painted mask. And then the next year, I painted. Frank painted it. He put put white in it. Made it. They call it sunburst. And I said, because when I talked to an eye doctor, and they said, they're asking me about my mask and that, and I said, yeah. He said, well, it's kind of an edge because you're, somebody's eye when they look at something, the bright color will be the first thing that they look at. And so he said, what, if you got guys shooting on me? And he said, they look up, their eye's going to be, might be a half a second or it might be a tenth of a second. I forget what he told me. He said, but their eye would go there first, which would give me an edge, which I always did.
And yeah, you didn't like having the edge, right?
His eye would be, take a second to adjust to where he was looking to shoot. So that's why I went with the starburst. And guys used to say, "Jesus, that's crazy." He said, like, they would say to me, "All I see is that bloody mask." That's good. Anyway, that's the story of the mask. So yeah, I did have the first painted mask and the first painted.
Right.
Like Cheesy always had the stitches, and he just did that as a joke. And but anyway, yeah. So he takes credit for it, having the first, not design mask or painted mask, but he had stitches on his mask. So we put him in a different category.
Now you're always linked with Bernie Parent because of the trade for him to Philadelphia, and you to Toronto. But really, you guys were intertwined all the way from junior on up. You guys played for Niagara Falls together. You guys were up in the Boston organization together, and then he came to Toronto. You went to Philadelphia, and then the swap and things like that. So you guys have been intertwined through a good chunk of your career playing NHL.
Gary, was 8 years.
Right.
We played together 8 years straight. In Niagara Falls, we started in the 63-64 season, and Bernie came in then, and they actually only had one goalie back then, but Ems kept both of us, and that was kind of the first two goalie system. Alternate, you didn't dress. The goalie, like the second guy who wasn't playing that night, he didn't dress. He just sat in the stands, and. So Bernie and I were in Niagara Falls the 2 years, and then we were in Oklahoma City for 2 years. He'd flip up and back and forth from Boston. He'd get the odd game in Boston that year, and because Cheevers was the other goalie in the system,
right?
And that ended up being that's 4 years, and then we were 4 years in. 67 to 71 when they traded Bernie. So we actually played 8 straight years together.
Was Oklahoma City at that time the Leaf minor league team, or that happened after, I guess?
No, we were the Bruins.
Yeah.
The Leafs were in Tulsa.
Ah, okay.
The Tulsa Oilers back then.
Right. Now you also hold another record, is that you were part of the expansion draft in 67, but you're also part of the expansion draft in 79. When Edmonton picked you up, and that's when you said that's enough, and I'll call it a career. But you're still the only person to be selected in 2 expansion drafts.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I didn't even know I was drafted. Nobody called me. Well, I was friends with. Actually, when I was in Oklahoma, I didn't think I was. I was. The 4 goalies in the Bruins system were Jerry Cheevers and Eddie Johnston and Bernie and myself. So I kind of thought. I might be at the bottom of this list. So I decided I'd go to university while I was there, and I went to school there. And when I was in school, I thought, I should stay in school and not think about a career past the Central League. But what happened was that, the expansion draft came in, and I got called out to play with the San Francisco Seals because I was kind of the roaming goalie in the system. And they called me to play in San Francisco, and I had to play a couple of games in San Francisco, and then I got called out the night we won the first Central League championship in Oklahoma. And Harry Sindon was a coach, and he called me and he said, "Doug, you got to be on a plane tomorrow morning. You're playing in San Francisco tomorrow night in the playoffs." And I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Jack McCartan was the goal. Jack McCartan got hurt." And he said, "You're on the list. You're the goalie for the Bruins system, and you have to go and play in San Francisco tomorrow night in the playoffs." Well, I hadn't played in 3 weeks because Jerry Cheevers played all the playoff games, and I didn't play, and so I had to go out there and play in 3 weeks. But in the games I played out there for San Francisco, I played pretty well. I had some good games, and the playoff game, I remember we played the Victoria Maple Leafs, And we won the game in San Francisco that night, which was the 6th game, and then we had to go back out the 7th game to Victoria, play the Victoria Maple Leafs, and we lost in I think we lost in double overtime in that game. But the general manager of the San Francisco Seals was Bud Poyle, and Bud Poyle ended up 2 years later as a GM for the Flyers, and he remembered me playing those games for him out in San Francisco, and so they took Bernie first, and then they took me in the, I think, 10th or 11th round. And it was a shock. I was surprised. I didn't really think I was going to go in the draft. And but anyway, when I went to university that year, I was with Glenn Sather. Glenn Sather was on that team.
Right.
And last time we lived together because we had to stay after the hockey season to finish the term in school. And Slats and I lived together for a month. And we knew each other and got to be friends. Well, he was the one that drafted me into Edmonton after I retired in Colorado. And that was only through the connection. I mean, you talk about connections, but there was, the connection there was Slats remembered me. That's in '79. He remembered, and he asked me to come to camp in Edmonton. And I didn't really want to go, but I went because of him. And then when I retired, I realized that I was living in Colorado. I'd built a house, but I didn't have a visa anymore. So he and they had 5 goalies, and he couldn't pay me. He couldn't pay me enough to go to Edmonton in those years because they had a boom on. That was when they had the oil boom in there. And
right.
I figured it out. I said, "What do you want to give?" I said, "Slash, what you going to give me?" I said, "I figured it out. I'd lose $10,000 by the end of the year." I had to pay rent, and for a house and everything. I just built a big house in Colorado up in the mountains. And I said, "Slats, I figured it all out." I said, "What you're offering me?" I said, "By the end of the year, I'll have lost $10,000. I said, "So if you can't pay me," I said, I'm going to retire, but you can do me a favor." And he got me. I coached. He made me the goalie coach.
Nice.
But I went to work at the ARP team was Houston, and I went down there and worked with a couple of the guys. Trying to remember who. Oh, Pete LaPresti. That was.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Pete LaPresti. Because he had Eddie Mio and Dave Dryden and myself and the guy, the other goalie, little Italian, played for the Italian team, Jimmy. Anyway, we can't get in. Anyway, the story is that's how I ended up in the NHL draft with Bud Poyle, and Glenn Sather was responsible for the '79. But Slats forgot to call me. He told me, he said, I told somebody to call you and let you know when, training camp and all that. I said, well, nobody called me. I didn't even know I got drafted. I didn't know there was a draft. So, because I finished playing and I officially retired. And anyway, I went back and I ended up coaching. I got a visa and stayed there. I stayed 9 years in Colorado. So I ended up coaching at Denver University. The year after that, I was at Denver University for 2 years with Marshall Johnston. And then I came back and I coached Brock University and the Sabres. I was 4 years a goalie coach for Buffalo with the Sabres, 87 to 91. And I got hired, and Ted Sater hired me in Buffalo, but after 2 years, they fired Sater and they hired Rick Dudley, who I played lacrosse with in St. Catharines with the Golden Hawks.
Yep. Another storied lacrosse career, too.
Yeah. So, anyway, it all comes around. There was that was a strange one, too. There I was with that. We actually played them the year with the Wings. We played Rochester in the final. And
wow.
I would fly. I would drive to Toronto, and I'd get on a plane to play the games in Philadelphia, and then they would fly to Rochester, but I just drove when the games were in Rochester because I could be in Rochester in an hour and a half. And
Right, sure.
I didn't try same as I had to drive to Toronto and get on a plane, and they might as well drive it. So anyway, that's what it was like back then, Gary. So
Right.
it was a different era, different world, and then no complaints. No, it was fantastic.
Right. It's funny because one of your other teammates, Jim Wasson, he when he was on the show, he talked about all the things that they're striving to do now. You guys had already. The big arenas you guys played in the Spectrum, you played in the Boston Garden, you played in Maple Leaf Gardens, you played in the Olympia, you played in all these places. Now they're trying to get back and try and do that again. You had a 40-game season. Well, they're trying to be full-time now. You had all the different bells and whistles that they're trying to come back to now. I think it was John Grant who said, it was like winning the lottery and then losing the ticket because between the 76 Olympics and a few other things, the league folded after a couple of years.
Yeah. Well, I can honestly say I never made a nickel from lacrosse. I was supposed to, when they got me in the wings, they said, "Oh, we're going to get the guy." I had an agent at the time, and who I didn't know was a crook at the time. And
boy!
But he took a lot of guys, but he didn't get me because I kept my own books. But anyway, he said he got me 10% of the team. Philadelphia Wings. He said, "If you come and play the Wings, we'll get you 10% of the team." I said, "That's great, right?"
Yeah.
You'll just get expenses. You'll get expenses. Everything will be expenses, but you're going to get 10% of the team. And I know the guys weren't making a lot of money. They weren't making squat back then. And I said, "Okay, well, it ended up 2 years later. This guy was, found out, and he got a lot of the flyer guys. Bernie was one of them, Cowboy Flat, and this guy's name was Howard Casper, and we called him Casper the Ghost. He never showed up until it was something for him. Anyways, I obviously never did get 10% of the team, so I can honestly say I never made a nickel from playing lacrosse.
Right. I really want to thank you, Kier, for taking the time and just walking us through some of this stuff. I got to admit, I was one of those guys. I watched you when I was growing up too, and I loved watching you play, especially in the early years for me watching the Leafs as you had just come over, and it was a whole new style from what we had been shown when we were kids. So it was fantastic, and I want to thank you so much for that and for taking the time and talking with us.
Oh, no, thanks. It's my pleasure. It was, like I said, I always, people usually ask me, "Do you have any regrets, getting traded?" And I said, when Bernie came back to the Flyers, I said, we both kind of made out pretty good. I said, he got 2 cups and I got big bucks.
Right.
When I went to Toronto, I got that 6-year contract. So I said, I got 2 cups. He got 2 cups and I got the big bucks. And somebody asked me, they said, "Well, would you trade?" I said, "I would have traded all that money if I could have got the 2 cups." So
Dougie, it's too bad that young players don't figure that out until it's too late.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It is what it is. And, there's still a lot of great people in the sport. And that's.
Oh, absolutely.
But they have changed it, and the money does change it.
Oh, just so you know, in '71, the Oklahoma City Blazers, they folded and the Tulsa Oilers took over and moved to Oklahoma City, and a guy named Tiger Williams played for them.
Yeah. Oh, I played for them.
Yep.
Yeah, I've got a million stories, but what happened was that year when I got hurt in Toronto the second year, and I had to go for a rehab, not drug rehab. I had to go get my game rehab, and they sent me down to Central League to play some games, kind of get back into it. And that's when Palmy was there. Mike Palmetier was there.
Right.
Oak City that year. And I forgot it. Yeah, I did go back to Oak City, and it was a big farm team.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of hockey and a big fan of the fact that you were a unique kind of personality at the time. You were a lot of fun, and a lot of times there would be stories that come from reporters talking about you because of your sense of humor.
Yeah.
I want to thank you for sharing a bit of that sense of humor. I'd like to have you come back and maybe do an hour on your humor, but we can save that for next time. All I can say is, like Gary, I'm a little bit older than Gary. I remember you really well. I remember you playing. And yeah, I remember as well that you got the Bucks and Perrant got the Cups. But I do know one thing. Back in those days, and I still hear it in your voice, the enthusiasm you played with on the ice. That's what I remember most. You were one of the most, how can I put this? You were activated when you were playing goal. You moved a lot. You loved moving, right? It was a thing that you were, it wasn't just a technique for you. It was your personality. And I'll always remember your style of goaltending. It was so different than so many other goaltenders. You were a lot of fun to watch. You really were. And you were a lot of fun here today and taking your time to talk to us. And I truly appreciate it, like Gary. And
Thank you very much.
I am so glad we've had a chance to talk to somebody going back to lacrosse, and somebody that there might be most of our viewers probably won't know, you from the Maple Leafs. They'll know you from your history. But I can tell you, folks, this man was a lot of fun to watch, and he was a very good goaltender. And that's before we had the 6'8" goaltenders. So back in that day, you were the right size for goaltenders. And one of the reasons why goaltenders stood up more than they butterflied, because of the size of the net, right? And how much of the net you couldn't cover.
Yeah. No, it was like I said before, I was a street hockey goalie.
There you go.
So,
Well,
we had a lot of fun.
You're a good man. You're a good man. And thank you for, for taking the time to be with us and sharing a lot of the memories that you had and your experience in lacrosse.
Yeah, thanks, Frank, and Gary, I appreciate it. And it's always fun to tell stories.
Absolutely, especially when you're a part of them.
Yeah, well, I can't talk about.
Well, we're gonna go off air for now, and Gary and I can hang around for a little while. No, just kidding. Whatever it is, thank you for doing this. All right. So for Doug Favell, Gary Groob, I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching, and we hope you see you again next week at 4:00 here on Thursdays, where we talk about lacrosse and sometimes even a little bit about hockey.